really looks at the big picture and tries to come up with new ideas. We haven't quite gotten Jack to understand the word no yet, but that's good in many times because it's easy for us to see that actually, and it's good when we have somebody pushing us, and Jack has always been the one in the committee that pushes us to the extreme and makes sure that we understand that there are people out there that still need us to fight for them. So I've enjoyed working with you and wish you the very best and hope that we get through this rest of this session in a timely manner.
The chair recognizes a senator from Polk, Senator Dearden.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, Senator Hatch and I go back a long ways, and some of it was really good. But one thing about Polk County politics, you have to understand, we just don't have enough Republicans to fight with, so we have to fight with each other. And Senator Hatch and I, gosh, we did a good job of that. But, you know, the last dozen years or so, I really got to know Jack, and I really believe maybe he's got to know me, and we agree with 99.9% of the things that we're passionate about. And Jack, this is good. We're going to miss you up here, but I know I can run downstairs and find you anytime I want. I was looking at the resolution and the last couple lines, and it says, and wishes him and his family the best, and then it says 4 in the years to come. So I assume that means the next 4 years downstairs. And so I know I'll be down there, and you know, and I'm going to twist your arm, and I might have to hold a gun to your head to get you to sign some of my legislation, but I'll be happy to do it. Thanks for being my friend, Jack.
The chair recognizes a senator from Des Moines, Senator Courtney.
Thank you, Madam President. Friends and colleagues, it's an honor to rise in support of Senate Resolution 119 honoring Senator Hatch. Someone told me I should say Senator Jake Hatch, since he has trouble remembering first names, but I'm not going to do that. I think it's appropriate for when Jack is speaking about this time of the day. Usually most of the Republicans are gone, and it looks like a lot of them are gone today, so I think that's appropriate. I want to thank Senator Hatch. I first knew him when before I came to the Senate. Actually, came up with the auto workers lobbying a time or two, and we would see Senator Hatch at that time over in the House, running around over there, and he was always a champion for the issues that labor was working on at the time, and I always remembered him and thank him for that. It's been an honor these last 10, 12 years working with Senator Hatch. I think he came over here, if I'm not mistaken, about maybe 2 years before I did. So he's been here with me the whole time. It's been a real honor, and I think one of the funniest things is that you all know Senator Hatch likes to talk, and when he'd be running a bill, when we were in the minority, especially, he was going to explain something one day, and he sat about over there somewhere, and he started to speak, and he got an easel out and set a big easel up, and you could hear all the Republicans going, and I think about half of us going, oh no, when he set the easel up. It was the funniest thing. And Senator Hatch always went in detail explaining everything. It's been a pleasure working with you, Jack, and I wish you many years in the governor's office.
The chair recognizes
in support of Senate Resolution 119, and I just want to tell you, Jack, I think it's been a privilege for me to work with you. We've worked on several things together, but we didn't get them all done for sure. I remember once when we were working with Frank and Kim and working on some health care and wanting to have a lot of good bipartisan discussion, and that's so doggone hard around here anymore. It is. And I remember you kept saying, you're going to really like what I do. Well, I liked a little bit of it. Anyway, I wanted to tell you it's been a privilege to work with you. You've always been very kind to me, and I want to tell you one of your best assets is your clerk, Alan. I want to thank him for his hospitality. We had a wonderful evening over at his house when he was entertaining a foreign visitor, and it was so gracious of him to include us. So thank you, Alan. Thank you, Jack. Wish you well.
The chair recognizes a senator from Lynn, Senator Hogue.
Thank you, Madam President. Doing a little work there, trying to get the session done. Well, this is a big moment for the Iowa Senate to say goodbye to a long-time and successful senator, former representative, who has done a fantastic job representing his district and working to make the state of Iowa a better place. I've known Senator Hatch for a long time, because as some of you know here, in 1989, when I was a college graduate, I got to clerk in the Iowa House of Representatives, pinned up against that pole on the east side of the chamber. I was on the clerk seat, one seat in, working for then State Representative Mary Newhouser. And of course, there was a state representative from Des Moines in the chamber at that time, who I believe, Mary maybe was your vice chair, or she was at least on your budget subcommittee. And I got to watch then Representative Hatch and Senator Varn spend the entire session bringing people in to the Education Appropriations Committee and giving them the once-over, right? Figuring out, poking them here and there and figuring out what their budgets were really about. And I think I was the clerk that got to call the roll, because I think she was the vice chair, and as the vice chair's clerk, I got to call the roll. So I got to know then Representative Hatch, and not particularly close, just admired him and how tenacious he was at the work that he did. And then I had my exile years, my 9 years in Minnesota, that I call my exile years, before I came back to Iowa. And I remember I was up there, and you know, young graduate school student up at the University of Minnesota, back this is 91, 92, 91, this must have been 91. Gung-ho for U.S. Senator Tom Harkin running for President of the United States. So we're out there, we're organizing, we're getting organized, Harkin for President, Harkin for President. And I don't know what the event was, but I'm in downtown Minneapolis at something political, something. And there goes Jack Hatch. I said, Representative Hatch. Had a nice visit with him. That's when he explained to me, he thought, the way I was describing it, sounded like Harkin was doing better in Minnesota than in Iowa, if I recall that conversation, jokingly. So I've known Jack Hatch for a very long time. In the legislature, he's been a great advocate and for a lot of very important causes. He's also a great legislator who knows the details. I remember when I was over back in my minority party member days in the House and needed to get something done, couldn't get it done through the House. So I came over and Senator Hatch said, yeah, we can. I needed 6 words added to the code. I had a project at home that wasn't eligible for something. I needed 6 words added for the code. And Senator Hatch looked at that and said, I think that can go in my budget bill. And so we got that done. And that was a good learning moment for me, when you figure out who the right person to talk to and they can actually pass legislation. That was a neat moment. Senator Hatch has really exhibited great judgment on some of the really big issues that have faced this place in my time in the legislative session, in the Senate, my time in the Senate. And the 2 examples that I always like to share about that I remember I was concerned in the spring of 2011 about a bill that I thought was going to be this massive ratepayer giveaway to the utilities to build a nuclear power plant. And it was, I was trying to figure out, well, what do we do about this then? The Fukushima disaster happens. Oh, now we really got to get geared up. We can't have that happen to Iowa and have millions of acres of Iowa farmland ruined because of a nuclear power disaster someday. So I got really ramped up on that. And Senator Hatch gave great advice during that process. Just fantastic judgment about how to move public opinion and how to move the legislature to help Iowans see what a risk that legislation would be. Another example, was this just last year? Gosh, these years run together. Just last year, we're at gridlock over something that to me seemed like an absolute no-brainer, which was the expansion of Medicaid. Right? Remember that? We were down to the wire on that thing. We were down to the wire on that. And I remember talking to legislators like, well, maybe we'll deal with it in a special session. Or maybe we can punt it somehow to next year. And I was worried about that because it seemed like, is this a really important situation for over 100,000 Iowans to be able to get quality health care through the Affordable Care Act? Kind of a fundamental issue. Here it is. Federal government has said if you want health care for 100,000 Iowans, 150,000 Iowans, do it. Well, Senator Hatch was one of those people who believed we had to get that done before we went home. That was his belief. And he was right about that. He was absolutely right about that. We had to get it done, and we got it done. And you look at, there are all kinds of personalities in this place, and people have their feelings about each other. And I imagine there are some people in this chamber who maybe don't think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, or they don't think that about Senator Hatch, right? But you know what? Every so often you have moments in a person's career and in your life where there's a real test about fundamentally where does that person stand on something. And, I'm sure Senator Hatch has had lots of boo-boos throughout his legislative career. We all do, right? We all make mistakes. We say stupid things. Occasionally we misjudge something. But you look at those big issues and you see the judgment that people make. And to me, that's one of the things that I'm always going to remember about you, Senator Hatch. You were very busy. You've got this bill that's 200 pages long, and you're doing all these things. Okay, and maybe I don't agree with everything in there, but on those big, sort of fundamental issues, where do you fall? Health insurance for 150,000 Iowans or not? Ratepayer giveaways for something that may never generate a single kilowatt hour of electricity or not? Right? Those are pretty big issues. And I'm really proud and pleased to have worked with you in the judgments you've made on this. Okay, final thing. So, as you all know, I represent Cedar Rapids, and as you all know, June 11th, 12th, and 13th of 2008, we saw something that no Cedar Rapidian had ever seen before in the long history of our city. Floodwaters above 21 feet on the Cedar River. Not only was it 21 feet or 22 feet or 23 feet or 24 feet or 25 feet, it went to 31 feet. 10 feet higher than Cedar Rapids had ever experienced before. And that's a life-changing moment for somebody who represents half the city of Cedar Rapids. It was another one of these fundamental tests. And by the way, the Iowa legislature and Governor Culver came through for Cedar Rapids on that test, something for which I'm going to be forever grateful. Didn't necessarily have all the support we wanted on everything we did, although we had some bipartisan stuff, some stuff that wasn't bipartisan. So that's a big moment. Well, Senator Hatch, of course, was here, an active champion for Cedar Rapids' flood recovery at that time, and not just Cedar Rapids, it was hundreds of communities across our state that had been flooded. But he did more than that, and you know, not everybody has gotten to see what Jack Hatch has done as a business person. But I'll tell you what, when Cedar Rapids was flat in its back, Jack Hatch, the business person, came through for Cedar Rapids because he saw an opportunity, he saw a need, and he came in and bought and helped begin the construction project and built, and they're open, and life has moved on, and Cedar Rapids is flourishing. He built, I don't know the exact numbers, about 100 units of affordable housing. The Pennington and the Adam. That's the Adam, by the way, the Adam Todd. That's not Aaron Todd, the Adam Todd. And he got those two buildings built. And it not only helped the city get up flat off its back, but it helped in a neighborhood that had long wanted redevelopment to begin redeveloping. And now those two brownstones are at the heart of the new Bohemia neighborhood and the Oak Hill Jackson neighborhood in Cedar Rapids. Rick Smith, a reporter for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, began just to convey to you how important this was. This was the opening line from the news article about the announcement that Jack Hatch, the business person, was going to build these two new affordable housing units. Headline, Jack Hatch has development plans for townhouse condos in Cedar Rapids, Oak Hill neighborhood. Article began, Jack Hatch is staring the 2008 flood in the face and marching straight into the future. That's what a reporter for the Cedar Rapids Gazette said about that development. Staring the 2008 flood in the face and marching straight into the future. That's why, little inside joke here, since that announcement, I've often referred to Senator Jack Hatch as Saint Jack. He really is a remarkable individual. I know we don't always like him all the time, but he's a remarkable individual. He's got a remarkable family. He's got a couple daughters he loves dearly who have been successful in their lives. Great wife, loves Iowa, wasn't born here, moved here, came to Drake for college, fell in love with the state. Great family, great business, long honorable service in the Iowa legislature. And Senator Hatch, whatever the future has in store for you, I will always consider you a friend, a colleague, somebody who I feel very strongly about, and will forever be grateful for what you did for the city that I represent when we were flat in our back and we needed some help. Senator Hatch, good luck to you in the future, whatever your future may bring, and it has been an honor and a privilege to serve with you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Stahl.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I too rise in support of Senate Resolution 119. I do think that part of this is unanimous. I would say, Jack, I was never quite sure where you stood on any issue. It was always a little bit unclear. And I would also say, as I was looking at this today, and there's just a passing reference to the environment, but when you first started in the Iowa House, folks, that he was elected on the environment, TCE and the water supply in Des Moines, that was kind of the issue you talked about back then. You know, we almost were in a position where we were going to have to close probably half of the gas stations in the state of Iowa because of underground storage tank requirements from the federal government, and no mechanism to deal with that, and Jack engineered the mechanism to deal with that. We had to take, essentially every gasoline station in the state of Iowa was eventually going to leak, and that had been tolerated for 50 years in our state, and then people began to realize this is a serious problem for the aquifer, and so the federal government passed some requirements, and we had to come up with a mechanism that would deal with remediating those places that were already leaking at the same time we created a pathway to an insurance market. And Senator Hatch worked on that. But the amusing part of it that I remember, Senator Hatch, is there were differences between the House and the Senate. I was in the Senate, he was in the House, and there were differences. There were some fairly sharp differences over that. But here's what I remember. So the Senate version said, okay, we're going to monitor these sites that have known releases. We're going to monitor these sites for 5 years. That was the Senate version. The House version was, we were going to monitor these sites where leaks had already been, we were going to monitor them for 10 years. So we go to conference committee, we work really hard, long and hard. As Bill Hutchins, the leader at the time, said to me back then, well, they won't get serious until the gates go up on the parking lot. The automatic gates go up on the parking lot. They won't get serious about negotiating to that point. So it went on quite a while, and on the last night of the session, you know, a conference committee usually just kind of splits the difference, right? House bill says we'll monitor for 10 years, and the Senate bill says we'll monitor for 5 years, and I'm not quite sure how he did it, but so what would the compromise be, right? You kind of all know what the compromise is, so what do you think the compromise was? 10 or 5? Senator Bolcom just said 10. No, the compromise was we would monitor for 12 years. That was Jack Hatch's passion when it came to the environment. The compromise was we will monitor for 12 years, not for 10 years, not for 5 years, not for somewhere in between, but even more. And that's kind of Senator Hatch. I'm for a clean environment. We're gonna, and here's what the House position is, and I'm going to outbid myself on the House position, and it's the same thing when it comes to access to health care for people, or a better tax policy, or equal rights, or any of those kinds of issues. Jack gets this much, and he says, maybe I can get a little bit more. And I've always admired that, Senator Hatch. I compliment you for it. Look forward to visiting you in a really nice house on Grand.
The chair recognizes a senator from Webster, Senator Beal.
Thank you, Madam President. I, too, would like to rise in support of Senate Resolution 119 honoring our retiring Senator Jack Hatch. You know, I represent, Jack, as you know, a pretty good-sized chunk of rural Iowa. And one of the things that has really amazed me is when you visited my Senate district, that you speak as fondly of your neighborhoods within your very small urban district, as I talk about the 42 communities in my Senate district. And you know, I think for a big city politician, for your message to resonate in rural Iowa, I think that's coming somewhere, and I think that's the fact that you treat pretty much your neighborhoods as I treat my communities. I worked with you on a number of things, and I've always appreciated, Jack, your vision and your passion. We've worked together on renewable energy, certainly on mental health, and what I'm very grateful to you, I'm very passionate as you are on autism legislation, getting that passed, economic development. But what I really admire most, I think, about you is how passionate you are Your beliefs are firmly held, and oftentimes I think of you as the conscience of our caucus. Thank you, Jack.
The chair recognizes a senator from Polk, Senator Zahn.
Thank you, Madam President. I would echo one thing that I just heard Senator Beal talk about, Senator Hatch, is you are a very passionate person. I've seen you for many years, and I don't know if you recall, this is kind of the day we reflect on history and where we met, but I remember one of the first times I met you was at El Patio Restaurant. Believe it or not, for everybody in this chamber, you and I were supporting the same candidate, and it was a local city council race here in Des Moines. And I remember we went down there, and there was just a little gathering outside there, and I recall our conversation. And at that time, I believe I was the mayor of Urbandale. I know that I wasn't in the Iowa Senate yet. And I do recall that, and I've enjoyed working with you, Jack. You certainly, we had something in common, kind of still do in regards to real estate, and I'm doing a little dabbling myself, but you're obviously doing it a lot larger scale than myself, and I've enjoyed those conversations. But one thing I always have appreciated is working with you on mental health issues. You have been someone that has worked very hard. We haven't always agreed on how to get there, but both you and I and most everybody in this chamber knew what the challenges were and what we needed to do. And you put a lot of time and effort in mental health reforms, so there's access, not a waiting line in the Polk County area and some other large municipalities, but access to all Iowans. And I've always enjoyed working with you on that, and we've always agreed most of the time about that. Broadlawns is another example. I tell people when I'm outside of the Capitol that a lot of times people read about when Democrats and Republicans don't get along, but a lot of times it's a lot stronger opposition when there's a rift between rural versus urban. And we've always, a lot of people in this chamber, Democrat and Republicans, have always gotten along and tried to focus on the people that we represent in our districts. Thirdly, most importantly, is your passion for your daughters. And I remember when I first got down here, I think you had a picture, and there's a picture floating out there when you had your young daughter on your lap, and how she's grown. And I had the opportunity to be exposed to her and get to know her a little bit when she was a clerk down here. And I know that you're a very proud father, and I commend you for that. Now, what I'd like to finish up with here is a rumor that was when I came down here, and you could address this in your comments. I'm not going to ask you to yield because that would be inappropriate. But I have been told that when you were in the minority, that you, and I don't want to use the word filibustered, but you were on the floor for several hours, and I don't recall what that issue was. And so you are kind of a legend in regards to being able to stand on the floor for a very long time period. But I wish you the best, and it's been an honor to serve with you as well. Thank you, Jack.
The chair recognizes a senator from Lynn, Senator Mathis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I too rise in support of Senate Resolution 119. Well, a lot of you know Jack as a fellow senator, but I know Jack as a person on the outside looking in. So several years ago when I was a reporter, I would have to call Jack, just like I would have to call Mike, and I would have to call several people asking for quotes. And Jack was always accessible. He was always very confident about what he was talking about. And he was also transparent. And that was very, very important in repertorial work. Secondly, as an outsider looking in, I work for a child welfare agency, as most of you know, and so we asked a lot of questions of Jack. You know, what's going to happen next year for child welfare and for families? He would give us an answer, but mostly he would listen to us, and he would make sure that we would be funded for the things that were important for the state of Iowa. So thank you for that. Thirdly, as a champion for women, he supports 50-50 in 2020. And last year, he said to me, or the year before last, he said to me, you know, wouldn't Pam Yocum make a great president of the Iowa State Senate? And so it was that seed that Jack was planting that supported Pam in her presidency, and there she is. He also has 2 daughters that he supports, and his spouse, Sonia, we talk about her independent spirit and how you respect that, and that's very important. Fourthly, as a community partner, and I echo what Senator Hogue has said about Jack coming to the rescue for the city of Cedar Rapids, and for many of us as a community partner, he didn't come in on his white horse. He came in as a person who wanted to help our community with recovery in replacement housing. That was a huge issue because more than 4,000 homeowners were displaced, and we needed apartments, and we needed replacement housing right away and long into the future. The Oak Hill Jackson neighborhood is completely different today because of Jack Hatch and his work, completely different. And Jack, then as a senator, as a fellow senator, he has been unafraid to speak his conviction. He is unapologetic about it, and I respect that. So thank you for your service, Jack. We appreciate it, and we will look forward to you in the gubernatorial post.
Thank you, Madam. Jack Hatch has certainly had an influence on many. That influence goes deep. It goes far beyond the issues of those things that both Republicans, Democrats, no parties, that public in general should believe in, and that is to take care of the least among us. I often hear that, by golly, and this is the old redneck, rugged individualist mentality of, by golly, I did it on my own, they can do it too. Well, life's got extremely complex, and I blame the computer for that. I am probably never will be convinced that that computer's the greatest thing that ever happened for mankind. But Jack was very much involved in preservation work of historical properties. That was extremely important to me just because we are who we are, because of those that came before us. And without that feeling of appreciation of those that came before us, we lose a wee bit of our being. I think it was Senator Gronsdahl that mentioned this morning the necessity of there being people in this chamber, of the House, of all chambers, all legislatures, that have institutional knowledge. And what's institutional knowledge? It's his history. Voltaire, the nom de plume of writers, French historian, so on, made the statement that all history is fiction to certain degrees of plausibility. Well, when it comes to Jack Hatch, Voltaire was not thinking of him, because there's been no fiction in the dedication that this gentleman, and I mean gentleman, has had in his absolute, your bosom, your absolute gut, your being is to take care of others. I knew Jack when he was poor. You may have even been on food stamps. But I saw him work, and that work did not take the place of his initiative to do those things for people that they could not do for themselves. It's so important because I think we will be judged. Those who believe, we will be judged on how we treat others and what we do for others. And Jack, you've been that inspiration to me. You've always been absolutely straight and honest. Now there's times you and I have got nose to nose and toes to toes. One last thing I can think of was the Newton Speedway. And by the way, last time you said that, you said Iowa Speedway, so I forgive you for your gross transgressions. But you've been a tremendous legislator. Yes, you have been directed to one primary issue. That's not out of the ordinary, because each of us, as I've stated time and time again, are experts in one area, but yet we're expected to know a little bit about everything. And when it comes to those issues that you deal with, my eyes glaze over, because they were not my motivation for education. And trust me, growing up in the wilds of Wyoming and Montana and Utah, and living off the land as my father and mother did in National Park Service, we had to fend for ourselves. And those are the people you look out for. I appreciate you. You're a friend, and you've been a tremendous asset to not only the General Assembly, the House, the Senate, but the state of Iowa. Thank you.
The chair recognizes a senator from Black Hawk, Senator Dotzler.
Thank you, Madam President. I also rise in support of the resolution honoring Senator Hatch. I actually knew Senator Hatch before I was a legislator, and a former lobbyist for the UAW, Frank Alexander, brought me down to talk to this House of Representative individual who told me that he said that this representative has more ideas than anybody you'll ever meet. And he, at the time, was looking at trying to consolidate government to make it run more efficient. And I was on then the State Workforce Board on the Private Industry Council, and Frank Alexander wanted me to talk to Representative Hatch about those issues. And once I got elected to the Iowa House, which at that time I had no idea I was even thinking about running for public office, I got to know Jack Hatch as a fellow House member who stood up and fought for the things he believed in and his ideas. And I want to tell you, he's got a lot of ideas. And we came across together in the same year to the Iowa Senate, and he brought his ideas with him. The time that we spent together, we were in the minority in the House for my 6 years with him, and it was the first 2 years we were in the minority here. And yes, Senator Zahn, I was here for that debate, and I believe Senator Hatch carried his passions into the Senate from the House, and I believe it was like an hour and a half on opening remarks to an amendment. and I think one of our own senators called a caucus and reminded us that we weren't House members anymore. We were senators, and we operate in a little different way. But I was pretty impressed. I mean, an hour and a half on opening remarks, and he was going through like 12 points on them opening remarks. And if I recall, he was still on the first third of the 12 points. So I figure if you multiply that out, it probably would have lasted 3 or 4 more hours. And it was good that we were brought to our senses, but you got to admire a guy for his passion. And when you're in the minority, you know about frustrations. You know all about frustrations. And we hope that we treat each other, fairly in this chamber and try to work things out. But Senator Hatch taught me that, you need to look at the big picture as a senator. You just can't look at your own district. And he invited me at times to go with him. And I remember one time in Marshalltown, he was having a small town local community type meeting where he was meeting with local officials and individuals who were in Marshalltown to really get a better understanding of economic development and talk about the similarities of communities in large cities like Polk County here in Des Moines and a town like Marshalltown, that Iowa towns are not unsimilar to our communities. And back when communities were more together in large cities, there were areas where you had little grocery stores, and you had amenities that were close to your communities. And as malls and stuff developed, all that competition eroded that, and the sense of community kind of fell apart. And it was important to learn from Senator Hatch about how we can work together, that it isn't just about your district or mine. The problems that cities face in rural Iowa is very similar. And his passion for it to take time during the interim to go have these meetings really showed to me that he cared about Iowa. And when I said he has a lot of ideas, I think that's almost an understatement, because as a person who works on economic development issues, he's always coming to us with a whole list of plans to make things work better for Iowa and grow, and it's quite a list. But one of the things that I've always agreed with him on and really learned from him is about our economy and a creative economy, about attracting young workers to the state of Iowa and making Iowa an attractive place so that our children and grandchildren want to stay here and fulfill those jobs that are being created, not just in big cities, but also in rural Iowa. So Senator Hatch, as was said before, lots of luck on your future endeavors. You're a person who is very successful because you made yourself that, and I've always been amazed how people can be a senator and have a full-time career outside here, and there's plenty of you in this room that do that, and it really takes a special person, a special talent to be able to manage both and be successful at both. And I'm proud to serve with you and consider you my friend. I didn't even have to get slapped on that either, so that's a pretty good deal. Senator Hatch, we're going to miss you here, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future.
The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Bolcom, for final remarks on Senate Resolution 119.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, colleagues, thank you for the kind and generous comments on behalf of Senator Hatch. There's been a lot said. I'm just going to try and summarize a few things about Jack. Jack is tenacious. Jack drives a hard bargain. He's a loyal friend. He's also a softie. I mean, he's got a huge heart. He's a tough negotiator. He's stubborn. He helps people that need our help, first in line to do that. He's a leader. He's a successful businessman. He's a family man, a father, and a good husband.
I think I got this resolution today, Jack, because I frequently, or not maybe frequently, on occasion I'm asked by the leader, can you talk to Jack about that? Or Senator Reagan. Jack, can you talk to Jack about that? See if he can get Jack to move. And so I thought, I get the resolution. Other people could have had the resolution. But Jack knows why he's here. I think Senator Black this morning says he takes his work seriously. Jack Hatch takes his work here seriously too. He does know why he's here. He's a policy guy with a broad range of interest, as we know. People have talked about some of those, and knowledge. I've had the pleasure to work with he and Senator Reagan on the Health and Human Service budget process over more than the last decade. Jack's been the leader of that budget, and it's been about seniors, children, people with disabilities, people with mental health issues. That budget is about helping the most vulnerable people. And you've heard Jack on the floor. We've heard him in Appropriations Committee, in the committees. There's never enough resources for those folks that are most vulnerable, but they didn't have a better fighter than Jack Hatch. Jack Hatch was unapologetic about the need for more resources to meet the needs that he saw. And on occasion, the education folks and the public safety folks and the environmental folks would feel like Hatch is getting all the money for his folks. But Jack was a fighter for that. In the area of health care, I mean, people have talked about it, Senator Hogue and others. There's probably no single person over the last decade that deserves more credit for the progress we've made on health care. And the initial pieces of that were a bipartisan effort back in 2006 and 7 and 8 to say that every Iowa kid, every Iowa youngster deserved coverage. And we started in a really good place. The Hawkeye program, we had about 91% of our kids covered. And the legislature, in a bipartisan way, over 3 years, decided to put a big investment, like $30 million, and it was unanimous. And it was led by Jack Hatch. And Jack corralled people around that issue. He went on to create a health care commission in the state. After kids, it was about adults. How do we get the 250,000 adults without coverage? And as he was working on Iowa stuff, he was also leading this national working group on health care with legislators from at least 25 states, the Jack Hatches in 25 other states. But Jack led a national effort preceding the adoption of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, at the national level, organizing state legislators across the country with his own time, his own financial resources, on a weekly call with leaders from around the country, and advocated and lobbied for a national system. Because I think what we understood in Iowa back then, after we finished or moved forward on kids, was we needed a federal partner if we were going to be successful in making the next step to ensure all those working Iowa adults without coverage, 80% of whom work full-time. So Jack had this commission. I know there were leaders like our leader that grumbled about, well, we don't need no commission. Jack said, no, that we need a commission. It needs $500,000. We need a budget, and he got it. And Jack just doesn't give up. You know, one of the things about Jack is he works really hard at stuff. And if you want to hang with him on the policy stuff and the work, you got to put the time in. And on occasion, I think some of us look at Jack and say, gee, slow down, Jack. Come on back, we're over here, and Jack's dragging us to this other place. And one of the things about Jack as it relates to that, I think, and I think it's a trait us Iowans have, I came here from somewhere else, but I consider myself an Iowan. Our initial instinct on things is, well, we're not sure we can do that. We're not sure about that. Jack's instinct is, my God, we're going to do it and get it done. You can't hold Jack back. And I've had a lot of arguments with Jack over the years on topics where Jack says, we should do this. I'm thinking, Jack, I don't know. Looking at members of the caucus and people are saying, no, I don't know. Jack's going, let's go there. And I think it's an Iowa instinct to be incremental and a little cautious and no, not sure we can go there. But it's really not in Jack Hatch's DNA to be held back. He would always come back to me, you're a chicken, you're not willing to press it, and he was right, but we've had our back and forth. One of the things about Jack and my relationship, we're pretty direct and pretty honest about things, and that's also I think why I got the task occasionally to go talk to Jack. Get him back on the team. But Jack does know that this activity here, it is a team sport, and we have to work together, and at the end of the day, he's actually really good at that too. Other issues, Jack's been a staunch anti-tobacco advocate. He's been a strong environmental activist. He's led in this most recent effort to reform our mental health system. He was an early supporter of medical cannabis, and he's been out there on issues that people care about. He also has one of the districts that we all love to have, a relatively, what we would say, safe district. He can take positions that some of us might want to take, but have a district that doesn't maybe allow us to. Jack's had really the luxury of a good, strong district that supports his work. When I think about the hard workers around this place, it's Jack Hatch. He's worked hard. He's always 2 to 3 steps ahead. He has a new challenge in front of him. And, when he decided to run, I'm thinking, geez, Jack, we're going to lose you in the Senate. That's going to be a real drag. You're really a good member of the Senate. I'm thinking, is there any way maybe you'll rethink this? And then, as time's gone on, because I'm thinking, there's no way he's going to win. And then I'm thinking, more recently, I've got your percentages up to maybe 25%. 50%, no. And I think he's got a really good chance. But I mean, as you depart here and look at this new challenge, I've had moments where I thought, geez, you should stick around. We could really use your help here. The journey he's on, a terrific leader. He has the skills, the intellect, the capacity, and the energy to lead this state. He will leave us behind if he gets this new job. He will keep us busy, as he's already told us. Nobody's going to work harder for the people of the state. So, Madam President, it's time to get this session done so Senator Hatch can get focused on his next goal. And I'd say to all of you, I threw a few percentages out, but I wouldn't count him out. He is a fighter, and he's going to leave here fighting like the Dickens to get this new thing he's after. Jack, you've been a great colleague, a friend. All the best in what's next. We look forward to seeing you successfully meet your next goal. Madam President, I move Senate Resolution 119.
The Secretary will read.
Senate Resolution number 119 by Committee on Rules and Administration. A resolution honoring Senator Jack Hatch for more than 4 decades of public service. Whereas Jack Hatch came to Iowa in 1968 as a young college student, even then a community and political activist, and whereas that zeal for public policy and public service led him to seek and win a seat in the House of Representatives in 1984, serving a total of 10 years. And whereas in November 2002, Senator Hatch was first elected to the Senate, and in January 2015, he will conclude his 3rd Senate term. And whereas during his Senate tenure, Senator Hatch has served on the Committees on Appropriations, Economic Growth, Human Resources, Labor and Business Relations, Local Government, and State Government, and is chair of the Health and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee. And whereas both in his public career and private life, Senator Hatch has been a tireless advocate regarding public health, affordable housing, environmental and human services issues. And whereas Senator Hatch has been widely recognized for his advocacy and received numerous awards relating to his tireless work in the areas of child and family services, healthcare policy and leadership, assisted living services, and community advocacy. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Senate. The Senate thanks Senator Hatch for his service of over 2 decades in the General Assembly and for a lifetime of public service in Iowa, and wishes him and his family the best in the years to come.
The senator from Johnson, Senator Bolcom, moves that Senate Resolution 119 be adopted. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion prevails. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Madam President. Not unexpectedly, this will be one of my last speeches of the Senate. This might surprise some of you, but running for governor has never been a lifelong ambition for me. But for the next 6.5, 7 months, it will be. For half of you, I know that you hope I don't make it. For the other half, you're afraid I just might. But nothing will replace the time that I've had in this legislature, first in the House and then in the Senate. This is a special place. Many of you recognize that. A place where we talk. It's a place where we argue. It's a place where we agree and solve problems. It's also a place that we create a few of our own. We've worked here 4 months out of the year. We spend more time here than sometimes we do with our own families. So let me start with my family. Sonia, Reagan, her husband Jay, this is going to be tougher than I thought. And my own daughter, Caslin, could not be here today. My wife, as you know, is my business partner. We have been working on this housing issue for 13 years, and she's the part of the business that is property management. I have the fun part. I create it, finance it, build it, and she has to deal with 500 tenants. And part of that is CLU classes that she has to take this week. It's part of our requirement, and she is there today. Reagan is working at Wells Fargo, and her husband Jay is actually down at our last project in South Des Moines, painting and getting those apartments ready. And Caslin, as you know, graduated from college and is a weekend anchor and TV reporter for NBC News up in Anchorage, Alaska. And she may be watching this on live streaming as I watch her on live streaming in her work. Before I get going, though, I really want to do something that we all know is kind of something we take for granted. Every year we get up and thank each other for coming. We thank the staff, but we really have to understand that we do our work and we're allowed to do our work because of the staff that is here. And I personally want to thank the Senate staff, Mike Marshall, Janet Hawkins, Michelle Bauer, Jennifer Biananino, Kayanne Brandt, Louise Brunell, Lois Brownell, Angie Cox, Jesse Hughes, Jay Mosier, Kathy Ola, Betty Shea, Kathy Stroden, and Maureen Kennedy Taylor. Those are the people who are here every day, year-round, making our jobs in a process way workable, and I just want to thank them right now. Thank you. there are more. There are doorkeepers and receptionists, Jerry Carlson, Leanne Carlson, Linda Flattery, Sharon Kimberlin, Bob Langman, Joanne Larson, Frank Lawful, Jack Miller, Christy Porter, and Dale Schroeder. They are the ones that take our calls, open the doors, are pleasant to us, greet us as nicely in the morning as they do at the end of the day. I want to thank all of you as well. There is another group that comes every year, changes every year, it's the Pages, and I could just offer my thanks to all of you with a story that my daughter actually tells very often. She was a Page here her senior year, and she was a member of the Roosevelt High School basketball team, and in her sophomore year, they were state champs. In their junior year, they were first runner-up. She had every expectation to be on the first team in her senior year, the year that she was a Page. And not very often does a parent understand or actually gets to see your child's first adult decision. But I did with Caslin. She had to ask Mike Marshall permission to leave early on Tuesdays or Thursdays at 1 o'clock. And that's unusual. She said, and Mike said to his professionalism, we don't do that. But we will for you because of your dad is a senator. And that bothered her. She didn't want special privilege. So she decided that she was going to be a Page and walk away from being on a varsity basketball, possibly another state championship team. And she did it, and she had little tears, and then she just, with the vigor of us, she just got into this job. She loved it. She loved being a Page. She loved meeting all of you. She saw something in action that for her 17 and a half years just heard me talk about. And a year later, when she was at Columbia College in her degree as a journalist, she said something to me that I knew changed her life as a Page. She said that being a Page changed her life. And the decision she made as an 18-year-old to make a decision that led to changing her life was a memorable moment for me, but I want you to know that you were all part of that. And we do that over and over again, and we don't see what we do to the young men and women who are Pages here. Some of you, actually some Pages become clerks, and clerks become legislators. It is a part of the process that I will remember and cherish, because that always doesn't happen. So to the Pages, this is a moment that you will remember, and I hope it has that kind of impact on you as it has had on my daughter. Now, it's also time to acknowledge our caucus staff. And in the Republican caucus as well as the Senate caucus, this is a moment in which we can get real political activists into our offices because they believe in something. And so that kind of enthusiasm from our staff, they may be young when they come here, but my God, they stay forever. And our caucus staff, they do stay. They stay because they love what they do and they know that it makes a difference. I could see, and I'll know that I've had trouble with Ron Parker, who controls the locked doors downstairs as a jailer in one of our correctional institutions. You can't always get in, but he'll let us out. Rusty Martin, our communications director, really has more ideas than Rob Hogue has points of personal privilege. So you know how important that is. And I can go on and talk about all of our staff, but they're very special. Teresa Kehoe, Bridget Godis, Carrie Scott, Kathy Engel, Jace Michaels, Erica Shorkey, Julie Simon, Sue Fecky, Erica Shannon Stevie, Debbie Kettlehorn, Eric Baker, and to a position that rotates yearly as Mike's assistant clerk, Kathy Riley. You know her father, Senator Tom Riley. I also want to make a special acknowledgement to three staffers who had particular importance to me. First is Alan Kessler, who's here. Alan is a neighbor. He actually met my wife first. He was a tenant next door to our buildings, and then he moved next door to us. Then my wife, quite frankly, without my support or permission, sold him an apartment building on contract. We happen to know a little bit about Alan, and we've had faith, and so he bought the building, improved it, moved a couple of blocks away. He's remained a friend to us and to my mother-in-law, who is 89 and lives with us. He and Dak come over often just to say hi. He's been a good friend. He's been a good clerk. And I'm not going to miss him because I'm going to see a lot of him anyway. But Alan, thank you for the work you've done. Then there is, second is Aaron Todd, our 2-year employee that's worked and does represent the extraordinary talents of a young man who, after spending a couple years with LSA, allowed his political instincts to come through and actually helps us not only with the statistical and the analytical ideas of how to move something through, but we rely on him for his political instinct, and something that caucus staffs do. And he represents the very best in us that knows where they want to contribute. And then lastly is Chris Bell. Chris Bell, you know, it really takes a very calm person to work with me, Amanda, and Joe, and Pam. We are four pretty passionate people who have the ability to push not each other but also staff. And Chris was able to navigate through that with me and with my colleagues because she believes. She lives it. She lived it when she worked for Governor Vilsack, and she lives it here. It's what I think many of us know about our caucus staff. We see that in both the Republican and Senate caucus, Democratic caucus. It's what makes coming here awfully nice. And I want to thank both Aaron and Chris for their work with me. And lastly, of course, is the LSA. They really become the backbone and the skeleton and the strength of this legislature. They have the difficulty providing professional services to both the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, as nonpartisan staff, and they succeed doing it. Their leadership with Glenn Dickinson and Holly Lyons represents some of the best that we have in that kind of legislative staff work. Rich Johnson and John Pollack and Patty Finero and Ann Verheuel that I've worked with most closely, and Jess Benson and Estelle Montgomery. These are people who, if you told, if they worked with the Republicans in the House, they could not and would not tell us what they were thinking. They provided us information in the best way that we asked for it. They held confidence that maybe most people couldn't. And they are real professionals. And so for Glenn and his staff, I want to thank everything they have done for me and for us. And at the very last part of my thank yous is to the lobby and to the press. The lobby are our friends and there are our foes. They could be helpful one minute and fight us the next. But in this state, they provided us information that we could always count on. We knew the biases, but we also know that there was honesty behind what they tell us. And we do our work well because we rely on their expertise. And in this state, there is no trading out in the lobby that isn't known. So you can't get too far. So I want to thank the many years I've been here to the men and women out in the lobby that at times we've chased down, we yelled at, we've praised, but in all good respects and all good relationships, we all do good work together. And to the media, there are friends, there are foes. I could write a lot of their stories differently. I'm being honest when I say I respect the work you do, and I have cautioned my daughter before she entered the profession, but she has a very good understanding, as our friends here do, about their role and their responsibility. Now the fun part, because I do want to just take a minute and let us know that this is, my farewell speech is not about what I've accomplished or what I think you should do in the future, because really the legislature is a place of relationships. And so this is really about you. And so I'm going to start with Senator Brad Zahn. Brad and I do remember where we talked at the restaurant, El Patio. I also remember meetings we've had while you were mayor and we were talking about local government consolidation. And you do have a very relaxed nature about yourself, because when we're in this meeting with city leaders and legislators and city and mayors across the metro area, you jumped up because I came in late, and there you were sitting in t-shirts and a shorts. And I said, this guy's different, and you have been different. You getting up every morning, thanking the hands of the minister or the pastors, that's a sincere and nice thing to do. And I also remember mostly, though, when we were talking about mental health. And I read the morning of our floor debate how much you wanted to improve mental health. And you listed everything that was in our bill. Everything that was in our bill. And we brought it up for debate, we voted on it, and you spoke against it, and you voted against it. And I was furious at you. I got up the next day, I got up in that floor debate and said that I thought there was something wrong. You got up the next morning on points of personal privilege and you apologized. You said you were wrong and that we were right and that what we did was the right thing to do. And you had a moment in which you were able to just reflect, and when you did, you changed your mind, but more importantly, as a political leader, you acknowledged that. That's not what happens too often. So that's the story about you that I'll remember. And you may not have an opportunity to say goodbye to the Senate. You may win your primary. You may win your congressional general election. But I do want to let you know how much I've appreciated your leadership and friendship. And then there's, of course, David Johnson. I'm sorry that he's not in his seat, because my brother, there he is, my brother loves him. He was reported in the paper of calling me the vicar of verbosity. I don't know why he came up with that. But whenever I talk to my brother, he always wants to know where that guy is and how he's doing, because he agrees with you. David, we've had good discussions. We've had arguments. Your contributions to Health and Human Services have been dramatic. I just only wish that in this legislature of the past couple of years that we talked more about philosophies and ideologies and we were able to work better together. But I know that you have worked hard with us on those bills, and my brother will not let me forget you. Nancy Rutger, we have had many discussions. We talked about alternative medicine. We worked on programs together that this body decided we did not want to support. She and I always believe in patient choice, and I always expected that she will always be the voice of people who thought a little differently and wanted a chance to provide services. And so I know this body will miss Nancy, and so will I. I also remember Mary Lumbee, our colleague and friend, who would give an inspirational speech and look over at me and wink, ready for me to jump up and argue with her. But mostly we agreed. She was a fine leader and a fine woman. I remember Stu Ivinson trying to beat me on all of my amendments, but working behind the scenes to get me votes. That's what a good leader does. So I remember Stu and what he's done. And Jim Seymour, wanting to support health care reform, participating in all the discussions, crafting the language and the programs, but knowing that he couldn't support it with a vote, because that's not what his caucus wanted him to do. But his contribution was in the back rooms, in the committee rooms, and in our private discussions. That's what good senators do. And that's when we were doing, and that's where we have to move, and I think Dennis Black talked about it, where we have to move away from ideology and move toward differences in philosophy. Our values are not much different. Our philosophies are. But if we are constantly tugged by the ideology of the political consultants, we then lose our ability to leverage those things that are most important to us. That's where I come to talking about my colleagues over here on this side. I remember Tom Courtney for his undying belief and dedication to the working men and women of the union movement. I also remember Tom, because we came in close together. He was an assistant leader. He was a majority whip. And Liz mentioned that I supported Pam for president. And it shows the kind of quality of the individual Tom is. I told him I was going to support Pam. He was a little disappointed. But when I decided to run for governor, Tom was one of the first people that came to me and said he would support me. The loyalty of Tom Courtney is what you enjoy and what we enjoy in politics, and that allows us to do so much more. And with Nancy as his partner, they have a strong bond, and I will miss you a lot. And then there's Senator Dotzler. He's the only person I know that can talk himself out of something he was supporting. This story is true. He was on an amendment that we were going to oppose, and he spoke eloquently on the opposition. Back here, the majority leader and the Republican leader were talking about maybe this was a good amendment. So Mike came down in front of him and said, Bill, read my lips. We're going to support this amendment. So Bill's response was, well, ladies and gentlemen, the longer I talk, the more I'm convinced this is a bad amendment. And vote it down. Then we have Herman and Jeff. You know, it's amazing that both of them are sitting in the front row next to each other, because when we have a professor and the other one, Jeff talks and acts like a professor. They give us clarity in our discussion. We understand more about bills because they do get into the depth of the consequences of our bills. The clarity of a discussion within our caucuses, and you've heard it here on the floor, is vital to us understanding great legislation. And the two of them are one of our best in this chamber. I remember Senator Peterson, when I first met her, was on, well, I got to know her really, was on a trip to Washington, D.C. when I took a break and I became Senator Harkin's state director. And he had organized this group of young Democrats to go out for a long weekend. What I remember about that whole period of time is that I got to know Janet and talk to her, but she never bought my rhetoric. She was always challenging what I said. And it was an inquisitive nature of Janet that you see today. This is not somebody who just has an assignment, who has to get through it. Janet Peterson always inquired, always asked the question, always wants to know what the truth is. I don't think she ever bought my rhetoric, political or not. She's one of those people that if you can convince, you know you've done something right. Rita Hart, first year, she comes in as a freshman. You can't go anywhere in Clinton County without knowing somebody who knows Rita Hart. And so when, Rita, you came here and you talked to the caucus, there's only one other senator that talked more than you the first year. You participated, we got to know what you thought, you didn't let anybody intimidate you. And that's going to serve us well. Darrell Beal, we came in together. Now I didn't know this, but Darrell ran for Secretary of State back in the 70s, would have been the youngest Secretary of State, and had a continued life of public service, and continues to understand the relationship between what we do here and what the people in our districts need to know. He has this relationship with his constituents because he works hard at it. Something I don't do. Coming from the capital city, it's hard to make those connections, or it's easier because we see everybody at the coffee house or at the grocery store or at schools a lot easier than the rest of you do. But Darrell has always been a unappreciated fighter for social services, for autism, for insurance parity. He's never sat on those committees, but his personal life and circumstances made him a tireless fighter for the underclass, the underserved, and the people who need the help the most. And Darrell, I'm so glad you're going to be here. Todd Bowman, he's as tenacious as a fighter for gas tax as he is a wrestler. And in every caucus that we have, Todd is a person that I respect as being someone who asks those penetrating questions and works hard at trying to please everybody. Knowing that he can't, he's very willing to take a stand. Liz Mathis is the person I referred to, Rita, as talks more than you when she came in. It took me 6 weeks when I went to the House, 6 weeks to give my first speech as a new member, as a freshman in the House, and I never spoke in caucus. It took Liz Mathis, the second caucus, to speak, and she asked the questions like a reporter. She's here for a reason, she knows it, and and when she knew she was here, she didn't back off. She kept on asking questions like a reporter. She searches for answers like a good senator. And so she has that ability and that wisdom to do that, even though there are people who wrote her a letter and said, gee, Liz, maybe you should talk less. She received support asking her to talk more. So Liz is, I'm going to miss hearing your wisdom and your support for those that need it the most. Brian Shanejohn, I was chair of Education and Appropriations for 2 years in the House. I had a particular issue that I proposed to Brian. It was to give scholarships to foster care kids, because foster care kids who are 17 years old who are not in the adoption program are really the custody of the state, and there was no scholarship programs for them at all. I gave my proposal to Brian and to Bridget Godis, and 2 weeks later, when I inquired where it was, thinking that it had died, Brian said, "Oh no, it's included." I didn't even have to fight for it. Brian understood a good idea, and as an educator, understood the need of these kids to have a chance of a scholarship at our private and our public universities. Then we have Amanda and Joe. Now, Amanda, I know I've caused you a lot of consternation. But you have guided me softly through the tempered waters. It was my first year here. I was on Human Services, and I was meeting the human advocates downstairs one Friday morning. And it was halfway through the session, and I had already copped an attitude that we weren't doing enough. And I talked to the human service advocates, and there were about 45 of them downstairs. And I said, "Your problem's not with the Republicans. Your problem is with the Democrats. They're not doing enough for you. There's this one particular senator that needs to be pushed." And I described it a little bit so almost everybody there knew who I was talking about. It's about Senator Reagan. But I made a bit of a miscalculation. A person sitting in that audience was her son, Charlie Wishman. And it got back to Amanda that I was critical. And in an easy way, she reminded me that maybe that was not such a good idea. And that was the beginning of our relationship of a woman who understood why she was here, protected the people that others have forgotten, and provided the leadership through this crazy process of making sure that they were taken care of. Joe Bokum, the most liberal senator in the Senate. I'm so glad he has that category, that label. He spoke well about our relationship. I expect a lot out of people like Joe, because I know, like me, we have safe districts. Our job is to push you, get you out of your comfort zone. But when I was pushing him out of his comfort zone, there was a sense of, Jack, you got to be practical. You got to be politic. You got to understand that you have more people here that aren't comfortable where you are taking us. So those first lessons that I got from Joe that allowed me to back away as much as he said I don't, backed up a little bit, threw the net a little broader, just opened up the discussions that we have to have in this place. Not lectures from me, but from the stakeholders. Not from the lobbyists, but from the people who they represent. What we did with health care was not listen to lobbyists or legislators. We were listening to the providers. One particular moment in that commission process I remember, it was up in Mason City. We were given $500,000. We had 9 months of an interim committee on health care reform. We had 29 members of this stakeholders group meeting with us as commissioners. And we were voting on the principles of the commission. And we were being challenged for the very first time about the partisanship of health care. And we were arguing, Republican representatives and senators, Democratic representatives and senators, and we were leaving the rest of them out. And I was just about to leap over the desk and make my point infinitively clear when Ro Faggy, my co-chair, put his hand on my knee and just said, "Relax." And then the very next person who spoke was one of those citizen commissioners. Her name was Julie Kuhl, representing the pharmacists. And I think I talked to Julie a couple of times to get to know her, but she looked at us and admonished the state legislators on this commission. She said, "What are we here for? To listen to you or to get something done?" And from that moment, that commission The reason we were so successful is because those citizen and stakeholders took over the commission. And for the next 6 months, they were the leaders of that commission. The legislators who were on it, we didn't necessarily sit back, but we pulled ourselves back and we let the people of the state of Iowa, who were represented by those stakeholders, to voice their opinions. That's why we were successful. And part of that is understanding that we do have to listen if we're going to get a consensus. And Joe Bolcom and Amanda were both on that commission with me, and we worked through all of those turbulent times to get to the answers that we needed. And there's Senator Steve Sodders. And he got appointed very quickly as chair of the Economic Development Committee. I said, what does a cop know about derivatives and investments and tax credits? He said nothing. And he probably didn't know very much about it. But he learned very quickly. To see a legislator come in here with an assignment that his leader gave him and to make it a dedicated effort to learn as much as he could and lead the effort on those issues was extraordinary for me to see. That's the time in which Debbie Durham came in with Governor Branstad as a new structure for economic development. It wasn't easy to understand, but Steve Sodders understood it, worked it through, negotiated it, and gave the governor something he badly wanted and worked with him to make it work. You know, Senator Yoakum, Pam reminds us every day that there are more Sarahs in this world than we would like to think. All of us have an image of people with disabilities, but we don't necessarily see the impact on their parents. Pam has been the most dedicated, I'd say, parent, mother, father to Sarah as anybody could imagine, and her ex-husband Tom participates as if he's there all the time. It's wonderful to see what happens to the human spirit when you have an obligation. You saw it this week or this month earlier with the moms coming in for medical cannabis. We'll talk about that later. Or the moms with trauma-induced injuries, head injuries. Those are the people that really have to get to us and understand and challenge us. That's one of the things we're here for, and Pam is the ambassador for that. Rich Taylor and Annette met as his first year. Rich has an interesting background. Didn't get to know him until he came here. He's a union man. Some of you are referring to people like Rich as part of the union bosses. You just have to meet him and talk to him and realize that's not true. It's people who are working every day, play by the rules, that represent the working and middle class of this state. And there's no better fighter than Rich Taylor. You go down into his community and you'll see how people respond and respect him. So I'm real fortunate to have him as a friend. Chris Brace, actually I think I went down and knocked doors for him in his election and he wasn't there. I didn't meet him until he came here. And saw that he actually was a pretty good senator. I mean, he got involved in things, represented what he was doing. He was a good freshman. But it wasn't until last year when we were talking about Medicaid expansion. Again, one of the moments that you know about in legislative history where you actually make a difference, We were debating. I remember our majority leader coming in and saying, now listen, it's the last week of the session. I have a deal with the governor. We'll come back in a special election and vote on Medicaid expansion. But let's get out of here now. Who wants to do that? Well, there were 3 hands that went up. The rest of us wanted to stay. So Mike, being the leader that he is, that didn't deter him. Okay, so he's got to change 12 people. He's done that before. So he kept on going at it, giving us ideas about how we can get back here and be ready for a new debate. Chris Brace ended that discussion when he just said, why are we here if we're not here to help the people that need the help the most? I'm not leaving until we pass Medicaid expansion. Now, I could say that, and people expect that from me. But when a freshman comes here and says, this is why I am a legislator, discussion ended. You know what happened. We didn't go for a special session. The governor understood that we weren't leaving here without that, and his property tax bill wasn't going to get passed either unless we did them both. And that's when the doors opened and we negotiated, and we got at least one great bill. Mary Jo. She came in here not so quietly. She took on an incumbent and won. But she has served children and the elderly as well as better than anybody. You know, we kind of had the children's thing together. There are a lot of us working on it, but we always seem to forget, not to forget, but we don't work as hard at protecting our seniors. And Mary Jo took that on, and elderly abuse, resource centers, all those things that needed to be discussed, she's championed and she's gotten through. Joe's saying, he keeps on threatening that those pills he has on his desk are really for us. That's not a horse story. But Joe, you have been a great senator and on issues of veterinarian, medicine, agriculture, and you had great hospitality here and in Davenport. I thank you for that. Bob Dvorsky, Appropriations Chair, see, he's not even looking. He thinks I'm going to ask him for more money. I will be, you're right. Yeah, I'm not finished. A very gentle leader that maneuvers the whole process very slowly, but warns us when there's troubled water, gives us a chance to fight for what we believe in. And will tell me I don't have any more money, but I know he goes around and secures money when we needed it. Tells me he has some money here and some money there. I get the credit for getting the money when it's not me. It's people like Bob, who also has the same values that I do. It's Mike Gronstall that understands he had a couple bucks in his reserves that could get something through. Bob Dvorsky understands the process and helps us achieve our objectives. So thank you, Bob. Rob Hogue, well, I only can say that if I am lucky and honored enough to get elected governor, I certainly hope that Rob Hogue is given no reason to stand up every morning because he'll have to criticize me. This guy would do it in a heartbeat if he thought it was wrong. So it's funny to see the lawyer in the group who doesn't hide behind a legal degree to move legislation. It's the social justice and the economic justice and the fairness that drives Rob. And that is what you don't expect from a lawyer. It is what you expect from an advocate. Dennis Black, I spoke earlier of my fondness to your wisdom, but you also have an incredible generosity that shows itself up in 150 ties you bring back that you give us. One of them is becoming my favorite. It's the invitations to go to other countries and see other cultures. I've never been on any of those trips. We have a business, and so when I leave here, I have to catch up, and I'm just way too busy to spend 2 weeks at another country, and always have regretted that. So again, I'll maybe change that next year or so. But your vision and your wisdom of bringing those cultures in is more than important. It's essential. We're going to miss that. Wally and Phyllis. You know, Wally, you've been here longer than any of us, and it looks like you're going to go down in history as the longest-serving legislator. You've also been a majority leader. So your contributions, I can't acknowledge because they go back so long. But your friendship and your willingness to protect some of your constituents, like the dentist, and every year he comes to me and says, is there money in there for adult dentists? Because there's so many low-income, poor people who lose their teeth and they have no place to go. And Wally understood what it meant for someone's self-esteem, something simple as that. Someone's self-esteem, and asking year over again whether or not there's money in there to help adults with their dentures or their teeth. Then there's Mike Ronstall. Mike, I appreciate you getting up and saying a few things, because there's nobody in this chamber who I've had the most admiration for, but I've also had the most trouble with. And let me tell you, let me give you a story of what two people can do in the moments of having a decision. We were talking about children's health care, and we've been working for 2 years on children's health care, and Senator Bolcom talked about the goal of having every child covered by 2012. And so I came up to Mike and I said, Mike, now's the time for a commitment. You know what we're doing. We're establishing this program, and I need money. He says, how much do you need? And I said, $25 million. And he looked at me, and he walked away. He took 3 steps, he turned around and came back and said, can I give it to you in 3 years? I said, yes. And that's why we have, probably today, the state with the second highest percentage of children covered in health care, because of the work we did, and that 30-second ask to a majority leader who knew it was coming, had a plan, and we implemented it. So, Mike, for the differences that we've had, you have the most difficult job. I've actually been more complimentary to you the last couple of years, knowing that I'm not going to be here, but understanding that it's hard to corral 26 Democrats and 50 legislators, moving it through the agenda of 2 different parties, 3 or 4 different ideologies, 2 chambers, all within a refined budget process. You have been marvelous at doing that. You have been an incredible leader. And I know no matter what happens next year, Mike Ronstall will still be the most powerful man in state government. Matt McCoy, I guess it's appropriate that Matt McCoy and Dick Dearden are here at the end, my 2 Polk County companions. Dick mentioned it well. He said we don't have enough Republicans to fight, so we fight among ourselves. It's really true. 30 years that I've been involved in Polk County Democratic programs and policies and politics, it hasn't always been easy. You're reading about part of our distinguished Polk County Democrats today on my Senate seat. People work hard in this county to become legislators. They work hard at moving and adopting social and economic justice. Matt was always a young, kind of the young protege who we always knew would have a great future. To be honest, our debut in the Senate together for a couple years didn't work very hard. Didn't start off very well at all. I won't go into all of that, but it shows the character of an individual. When we finally resolved the differences between the two of us, he became one of my best friends here, one of my true loyal compadres, an advisor, and a guy who works tirelessly on many issues. We trust each other, and we know each other's faults, and we work with each other well together. That's the kind of relationship you really want to develop in here. And so it just goes to prove that you could have differences. You work hard, and you could resolve them, and you end up being good friends. And that's what it was with Dick. But see, it's not just Dick. It's Dick and Sharon. Many of you know Dick's wife, Sharon. And it's really not just Dick and Sharon. It was Dick and Sharon. And, of course, Dick's longtime assistant, Joanne. We've been friends with for so long. Joanne and Jim have been strong Democrats in this county, and their family and I have been friends for a long time. But you don't get Dick without Sharon. And if you make one mad, you made both mad. So my job was really trying to get both of them to like me at the same time, and you know how hard it is just to get one person to like me. So it's taken me many years, but I've done it. And Dick has been a strong supporter of the things that we all like, and is articulate in caucus and on the floor. Well, I do appreciate what people have said. Thank you very much. It's not so much the speeches on the floor that I will take with me. It's the personal and private conversations we've had throughout the years. My job here is protecting Iowans and allowing Iowa to grow. It's about protecting our natural resources and not forfeiting them in the future. It's about educating our youth, but not forgetting our seniors. It's about healing those that are sick and helping the rest of us stay healthy. In the end, we are here to do a job. And I use this next phrase in complimenting Senator Harkin and giving him a bit of an honor when I was asked to describe who I thought Senator Harkin was. It's the same honor that I give us and why we are here. And for me, it's for those who smile through silent pain, cry behind closed doors, and fight battles that nobody knows about. That is why I'm here. And that's what I leave you. Thank you.